Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed participants, I'm glad to welcome you to United for Justice, United for Heritage high-level experts conference dedicated to ensuring Russian accountability for war crimes against Ukraine's statehood, culture and identity, and the protection of our cultural heritage. Шановні гості, пані та панове, я радий вітати вас на міжнародній конференції високого рівня United for Justice, United for Heritage, яка присвячена збереженню відповідальності Росії за воєнні злочини проти української державності, культури та національної ідентичності та захисту нашої культурної спадщини. And before we will start, let's commemorate the memory of all the victims of Russian barbaric aggression with the National Minute of Silence. Перед тим, як ми розпочнемо, вшануймо пам'ять усіх жертв варварської агресії Росії проти України загальнонаціональною хвилиною мовчання. Дякую. Шановні учасники, наша конференція офіційно. Запрошується прем'єр-міністр України Денис Шмигаль.
Our conference has officially been started. The floor goes to Denis Shmyhal, Prime Minister of Ukraine. Dear Mr. Prosecutor General of dear ambassadors, dear participants, dear acting minister, today we are here in order to have yet another step to justice, to bringing Russia to responsibility for its barbaric actions. On the platform of United for Justice, we shape joint decisions and tools to implement the principle Russia will pay literally with big money for the huge evil that it brought to Ukraine, because the enemy has the ideology of the total ruination. It destroys plants, farms, houses, residential buildings, schools, museums, theaters, historical sites, and other heritage elements. We have been waging ideological war for the cultural heritage. Russia has named it as Russian, and that's how it provided grounds, so-called grounds, for taking Ukrainian territories. Today, pseudo-historical arguments by Putin, of course, make us feel that it is hilarious, but it is still supported by the tanks, by shells, by airstrikes, and we do have this total war, and the aggressor has no shame in destroying what it used to call its cultural heritage just the day before yesterday. That's why the cultural heritage and hard cultural sites, we see that a lot there is a lot of suffering. Sveto-Preobrazhensky Cathedral in Odessa, museum named after Skovroda in Kharkiv, dramatic theater in Chernihiv, and many other sites of culture and history have become the victims of Russians. Overall, over 900 items. So-called symbolism of it is the drone attack on the Shehevich museum in Lviv region. It means that they are still afraid of the heroes of the past. They are fighting not only with the alive, but with the dead as well. We see that there is total cleansing and filtration of museum collections everywhere. Now, under occupation, there are more than 20,000 cultural sites of national and regional importance. That is why liberating the territories taken by Russia, it's also bringing back a part of our Ukrainian identity, reclaiming it. When Ukraine is swiping away the enemy still they want to loot even more. When the invaders were running from the Kherson region, they looted more than 1,000 artifacts. It then ends up either in private collections or in Russian museums, and the Putin regime goes on this cultural war and cultural rooting started back in the USSR. That is why we really need to react to such backdoor trading of cultural objects. We need to have interaction between law enforcement officers of different countries. According to the World Bank, the losses of Ukraine, in particular, taking into account the thing that were not received, it's $19.6 billion, and it's only information from the controlled territories of Ukraine that were deoccupied. For the long-term restoration, it is required $8.9 billion, and we have the support of the partners. Ukraine is grateful to UNESCO for effective cooperation during the war, for providing 20 of our objects the status of strengthened protection, and for the exclusion of the Russian Federation from the executive border, and for further support of cultural heritage. We are grateful to our partners who have taken patronage over the protection of the cultural sites, in particular Italy, that will help restore the downtown of Odessa, and we encourage other countries to engage in the renovation of other regions of Ukraine. It's important to thoroughly estimate the losses that would become further evidence in international judicial institutions that as well oil ruinations or all objects that suffered, all cultural heritage sites will be entered into special state register, which will be one of the tools to determine compensation from the Russian Federation. We need to understand that Russia is committing war crimes. It is providing genocide not only by destruction of people, but also by destroying our identity symbols, our cultural heritage, and that is why we need to fix it in the indictment for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. Each barbaric act that was taken against non-material, non-property objects or cultural heritage must be either secured by direct payments or by Russian assets. Everything that has been stolen must be brought back home. We will not allow Russia loot our culture anymore. The world needs to have the precedent for the punishment for such looting, and it will have a vital impact in preserving our civilization in all continents and all over the world. I believe that the justice will have its victory. We will exert our best efforts together. Glory to Ukraine.
I invite on to Ukraine.
Dear Mr. Prime Minister, dear ministers,
Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's truly a privilege to welcome you all in Kiev at the high-level conference United for Justice, United for Heritage. In recent years, threats to the world's cultural heritage have become increasingly brazen. In war, the cultural property is often targeted and exploited. In certain instances, it serves as a means to pursue and fuel hatred. Russia's unprovoked and unjustified war of aggression against Ukraine is by no means exception. There is a mounting evidence of damage, destruction, plunder, and looting of Ukraine's cultural heritage. Some of the grave violations even predate 2022 full-scale invasion, being committed following Russia's occupation and annexation of Crimea and occupation of eastern regions of Ukraine in 2014. With more than 902 destroyed and damaged cultural sites, looting of 40 Ukrainian museums and tens of thousands of stolen cultural items, Ukraine's cultural heritage, history, religion and memory became a targeted victim in Russia's encroachment on Ukraine's sovereignty, statehood and Ukrainian identity. Raphael Lemkin, explaining his concept of vandalism in 1933, noted that an attack targeting a collectivity can also take the form of systematic and organized destruction of the art and cultural heritage in which the unique genius and achievement of a collectivity are revealed in fields of science, arts and literature. The contribution of any particular collectivity to world culture as a whole forms the wealth of all humanity, even while exhibiting unique characteristics. Although Lemkin failed to gain explicit endorsement of his notion of cultural genocide, he became a determined advocate, drawing attention to the prominence of assaults on the group's culture and the need for appropriate legal framework. Today, no one doubts that there is an intrinsic connection between culture and nation under a single notion of people's identity that shapes the values and affiliations of the population. Therefore, it comes as no surprise that during the war, the destruction of cultural elements become one of the means to deconstruct the identity of nation. These violations are acknowledged as threats to international peace, security, and sustainable developments of the societies. During such volatile times, it is a monumental challenge to preserve and protect cultural heritage through burden sharing to be undertaken by the international community. In past 100 years, we have designed a legal framework for the protection of cultural property and its illegal trafficking through the 1954 Hague Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict and its protocols, the 1970 Convention on the means of prohibiting and preventing the illicit import, export and transfer of ownership of cultural property, the 1972 Convention concerning the protection of world cultural and natural heritage, and so on. Clearly, the problem lies not in the quantity of international legal instruments, but in their uneven enforcement. Therefore, a related but distinct lens is to focus on accountability of those who lead and commit assaults on cultural heritage, both on national and international level. During the conference, we would have an opportunity to discuss our national efforts, as well as practice of the international courts and tribunals to secure justice and accountability for assault on cultural heritage under international law. Another critical issue concerns the recovery and reconstruction of cultural heritage damaged or destroyed during war. It is not only an essential aspect of peace building and post-conflict reconstruction, but an indivisible part of the healing process for Ukrainian society, for our multi-ethnic community. Therefore, Ukraine needs a long-lasting support and assistance from its allies and partners that have gathered today in Kiev. We need to remain mindful of a simple truth so eloquently embodied in the preamble of the Rome Statute. All peoples are united by common bonds, their cultures pieced together in a shared heritage. Unfortunately, this delicate mosaic is being shattered in Ukraine, and we must act united in response. Russians who first time after Second World War committed crime of massive forced deportation of Ukrainian children as an attempt to steal our future, intentionally destroying our cultural objects, our heritage, looting them. They are trying to steal even our past. We must act united to make them accountable and to return back our future, our children, and to return back our heritage, illicitly looted by Russians. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please pay attention to the screen for a welcoming message from Christos Giacomopoulou, Director General of Human Rights and Rule of Law of Council of Europe.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, a variety of invaluable cultural artifacts continue being destroyed or severely damaged in the context of the Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine. Ancient sites that have survived world wars and natural disasters are now razed to the ground. This is not only a terrible loss for Ukraine, but also a loss for humankind and for our shared cultural heritage. Let me say it clearly. Cultural property, objects that are proven to have been intentionally destroyed or damaged or to have disappeared as a result of the Russian Federation aggression against Ukraine, should be an indivisible part of future reparations. Unless lost objects are returned or there is full restitution, then restoration, renewal, substitution, or recreation of these cultural objects should be foreseen. For movable cultural artifacts that are looted, restitution should be the final goal, and compensation considered only if restitution is impossible. Here, on this aspect, notwithstanding its limitations, the European Convention of Human Rights, the case law of the European Court of Human Rights, and the practice of the Committee of Ministers in the execution of court's judgments can give guidance in evaluating the amounts of damages and losses. In the overall wider context, of course, there is not only a financial cost at stake. Unfortunately, by definition, a significant part of our cultural heritage is irreplaceable and cannot be put on a monetary scale. In your deliberations today, you may wish to reflect upon potential collective forms of reparations that would require a larger scope of action. As you will know, the Register of Damage for Ukraine, which was established under the auspices of the Council of Europe, shall serve as a record of evidence, a record of claims for damage, loss, or injury caused by Russia's aggression against Ukraine. And this constitutes the first step, only the first step towards the consolidation of a comprehensive international compensation mechanism. In a recent conference held under the Latvian presidency of the Committee of Ministers, addressed, among other topics, the potential role of the register when it comes to cultural heritage. Moreover, in December, in its statement, last December, the Register's board identified a category of damage to historic and cultural heritage as one of the potential categories of claims that it will register. The final list of the claims categories will be defined soon. It will be defined by the board, and this would be made in line with the Register's statute. At this stage, the meticulous documentation and the effective investigation of the destruction, of the damage or disappearance of cultural heritage is crucial. any such occurrence should be scrutinized with the highest level of seriousness, the highest level of professionalism. This is, of course, easier said than done. And we fully realize that Ukraine needs support for this. As noted in the recent Council of Europe report on remedies and redress mechanisms for war-affected individuals in Ukraine, greater capacity, methodologies, assistance, and also funding are needed in identifying and registering which cultural artifacts have been damaged or destroyed that would qualify as objects that need restoration as heritage objects. In other words, to be identified as the International Criminal Court identified objects in the Al-Mahdi case. The recent Council of Europe Convention on Offences relating to cultural property, the so-called Nicosia Convention, establishes also a number of criminal offences in this regard. And I believe Ukraine's signature to the convention, to this Nicosia Convention, could certainly be beneficial. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude by reconfirming the value of our cooperation for justice and accountability, without which there can be no sustainable peace. Let me once again commend the commitment and resilience demonstrated by the Ukrainian authorities and the Office of the Prosecutor General through these difficult times. The history of our continent is full with destruction and devastation, but it is also marked by an extraordinary spirit and of reconstruction, a wish of reconstruction. If we remain firmly dedicated to the rule of law, to democracy and human rights in our endeavors, we are effectively protecting a crucial part of our cultural heritage that generations suffered to maintain. Let us truthfully continue pursuing that route together. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next welcoming video message is from Didier Reynders, European Commissioner for Justice.
Ladies and gentlemen, since the start of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine almost 2 years ago, the Commission has strongly condemned Russia's illegal attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure. This includes the destruction of cultural heritage as a method of war. The systemic nature of Russia's actions against historical monuments, particularly those with strong symbolic and religious meaning, is unprecedented in Europe. UNESCO studies have recently verified damage to more than 300 sites since the start of the war. This strategy, which aims at undermining the unique ethnic and religious diversity of the Ukrainian population, should be matter of concern to all of us. It is for this reason that the Commission has recently created a special group within the expert team on cultural heritage. The group, in line with the EU Work Plan for Culture 2023-2026, focuses on safeguarding cultural heritage in Ukraine and preserving its diversity. The attacks by Russia against Ukraine constitute a loss not only to the affected communities and to the identity of the people of Ukraine, but also to the international community as a whole. The Commission is determined to ensure that Russian actions do not go unpunished and fully support the International Criminal Court in its investigations into the situation in Ukraine. The Rome Statute confers upon the court jurisdiction over crimes against or affecting cultural heritage. In exercising this important competence, it is essential that we ensure that the ICC and its prosecutor have sufficient institutional capacity at their disposal. Almost 2/3 of the EU member states have already opened investigations on alleged international crimes committed in Ukraine. Eurojust's role in coordinating these efforts and supporting national authorities in collecting evidence is critical. In this regard, the now fully operational Core International Crimes Evidence Database can store and analyze evidence of international crimes, including cases involving the destruction of cultural property. Eurojust has also been supporting the work of the Joint Investigation Team on Ukraine. The team, in which Europol and the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC also participate, comprises 6 EU member states and Ukraine. It has been investigating alleged international crimes in Ukraine since March 2022 and has clearly illustrated its added value when it comes to ensuring that perpetrators of international crimes committed in and against Ukraine are held accountable. I therefore welcome that the Joint Investigation Team's agreement will be prolonged today. In the context of this team, the Commission has supported the establishment of the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine, which is fully operational since the end of last year. The Commission is fully committed to ensuring that the Russian Federation will bear the legal consequences of its internationally wrongful acts, including the consequences of attacks against cultural, religious, historical, and other protected objects. This includes the payment of reparations for the tangible and intangible damages caused by this war. The establishment of the Register of Damage is an important first step for recording evidence and information on claims for damages, losses, or injury caused by Russia's aggression. The Commission welcomes the fact that the first submissions of claims to the register will already take place by next April. But our efforts must not stop here. The European Union has already stepped up its efforts in preparing for Ukraine's further reconstruction. The Ukraine facility is expected to be adopted shortly and will significantly contribute to Ukraine's recovery with up to 50 billion euro until 2027. I welcome the recent adoption of the acts that allow to set aside the revenues generated from Russian assets immobilized in the European Union. The next step is now to ensure that these revenues can be channeled to Ukraine via the Ukraine facility to support Ukraine's reconstruction and recovery. The Commission, together with the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs, is committed to ensuring that this decision can be taken as soon as possible. To conclude, let me reiterate that cultural heritage is a matter of urgency, and I hope that today's discussions will pave the way towards a robust and unified response. Thank you very much.
Our next distinguished speaker joining us online is Karim Khan, prosecutor of the International Criminal Court.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really honored to make a contribution to this conference through these brief remarks that I will be making right now. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today, but it's only right to express my gratitude to my dear friend Andriy Kostin, the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, for convening this event, for supporting the office, and for the partnership that we have developed. I recognize the presence of eminent speakers We've already heard from my friend, the Commissioner for Justice of the European Commission, Didier Reynders. We have Poland, Romania, Lithuania, all represented, as well as, of course, my friend Ladislav Hamran from Eurojust. Nobody is there to make up the numbers. You all represent critical partners in the collective work to ensure accountability for the most serious of crimes. And we gather today during extremely precarious times. Precarious times for Ukraine and troubling times for the world. At this very moment, at this conference and surveying the globe, we see an acute need for justice, for the rule of law, for the proper, fair, and consistent application of international humanitarian law, public international law, as a center point for stability during a period of deep destabilization across the globe. It's my conviction that our work, our collective work, the hard work of criminal investigations, collecting evidence forensically, step by step, away from the cameras, in the rain, in the cold, in the snow, in the heat, getting to the truth, partnering, building trust with survivors, building partnerships with states, with civil society, with private actors is more essential now than ever to provide an anchor of stability and security, and particularly at a time when the fog of war is thickened by misinformation, manipulation around the globe at really unprecedented levels. We gather today just over 2 years since the invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. In fact, yesterday, the 28th of February, marked the 2-year anniversary of my decision to proceed with the opening of an investigation. And 3 days later, my office received an unprecedented number of referrals from state parties, ultimately reaching 43 states in total, that enabled us to swiftly commence our actions. And since then, we have seen significant innovations in the ways we work together to deliver justice. We found new mechanisms, carved out new solutions for engagement, for collaboration, that are benefiting the work in Ukraine and also benefiting our work in many other situations, crying out for justice. Together with you, in close cooperation with the Prosecutor General's Office and with many other domestic and international partners, we have made very significant advances. I have been clear in the situation in Ukraine, in the situation in the state of Palestine, and across all situations around the world, that if the law is to serve as an anchor of stability in these tumultuous times, it must show its relevance in real time. We must work at the speed of relevance. We must collect reliable and cogent evidence, investigate incriminating and exonerating evidence equally. And this, I believe, we have been able to do really in a very commendable way in the Ukraine situation, but we need to do so more widely as well. Since the warrants were issued last March in the Ukraine situation, my office has continued to pursue different lines of inquiry with focus and with determination, reflecting the vast numbers of different forms of alleged criminality in Ukraine. We have expanded yet further our field presence. We have, as everybody knows, I think, an office in Kyiv, and we are active around the countries in different parts of Ukraine. And in due course, I have no doubt that we will see the impact of this ongoing work, this vital, important collaboration and partnership with all of you. I wish to underline that we remain committed to ensuring a measure of justice for the victims and the affected communities in Ukraine. as we seek to do in all situations in which we are engaged. We can't forget them in events like this. Monuments, it seems, have been attacked, but people are suffering, people are hurting, and people need the shelter of the law and the support of all of us and the tremendous support that you are all giving to the quest for determination, the determination for the protection of the law to be spread wider in Ukraine and around the world. Excellencies, with respect to the theme of this particular conference, we can observe that willful attacks on cultural heritage are a centuries-old practice that remains, unfortunately, a very pervasive feature of modern conflicts, including in Ukraine. These types of crimes that seek to abuse, to twist the common deep bonds of a community, represented by their churches, in their monuments, in their literature, in order to hurt that community through destruction, need and demand investigation. Cultural heritage is part of our historical, our cultural, our national communities' DNA. To hurt them is to hurt and affect communities. And I recall my own direct experience when I was working as the first special advisor and head of the United Nations investigative team to promote accountability for the crimes committed by Daesh, ISIL. When I walked through so many churches and mosques in Mosul, throughout Iraq, in fact, some used as firing ranges, some desecrated with writings on the wall and in relation to what had taken place in those holy sites. I visited sites of the Yazidi temples that had been deliberately destroyed. And I saw the pain of the communities that had been affected by much loved, precious locations where marriages had taken place, where people had come together as a community to pray, where funeral services in times of peace had taken place to give dignity to those that had gone. And in Ukraine, we have seen many allegations of historical centers, museums, and other cultural heritage sites directly impacted by attacks. I've seen for myself, firsthand, the impact of the broad destruction wrought upon the population centers in Ukraine, and we can't allow this to stand. It is not consistent with the laws of war to deliberately target such cultural sites. And any evidence to show that that has taken place may represent crimes under the Rome Statute. You will all know very well, there are so many experts of international humanitarian law, international criminal, and the International Criminal Court in your audience today. You know very well that the ICC was established conscious that all people are united by common bonds, their cultural pieces, their cultures pieced together in a shared heritage and concern that this delicate mosaic may be shattered at any time. The Rome Statute confers upon the court jurisdiction over crimes against or affecting cultural heritage, most directly in the form of a prohibition on intentionally directing attacks against certain buildings. Specially protected buildings include buildings dedicated to religion, education, art, sciences, or charitable purposes, and also historical monuments. If attacked, such engagements, such targeting may constitute war crimes under the Rome Statute, provided that they are not military objectives. And the ICC Office of the Prosecutor, building on a productive cooperation with UNESCO in September 2015, first brought charges relating to attacks against cultural property in the Al-Mahdi case in the situation in Mali. The jurisdiction is not theoretical. The law is there to be used when the evidence demands it. This is the approach of my office. In September 2016, Mr. Ahmed Al-Faqi Al-Mahdi was convicted of the war crime of intentionally directing attacks against buildings in the ancient city of Timbuktu, buildings dedicated to religion and historical monuments, following his own admission of guilt. Our ongoing case against Mr. Al-Hassan Al-Abdul Aziz in the Mali situation also builds upon this precedent and likewise includes charges for intentionally directing attacks against protected buildings, in addition to other charges such as rape and sexual slavery. The case is currently in the deliberation phase, and judgment will be pronounced in due course by the trial chamber. Again, the jurisdiction of the court is not for the adornment of the statute. Unfortunately, in the world in which we live, the statute has a part to play to put a spotlight on the violations that took place in Mali, and this is our approach in relation to any other situation within our jurisdiction, including Ukraine, where the evidence demands action. I wish to express my real, genuine willingness to receive any information and to assess evidence, submissions from civil society, from the prosecutor's office, with respect to such crimes in Ukraine, and to continue the really excellent partnership with the Prosecutor General's office and other partners, whether it's the JIT or national authorities. It really is critical that we continue to consider jointly who is best placed to pursue what lines of investigation. And because of this convergence of actors, this demand, this renewed energy to ensure that the rule of law is rendered dynamic and effective and to protect, there's many options. There's a great deal of scope to work with different national authorities, with Ukraine, with the ICC, and with other fora to make sure that there is real accountability, not just conferences, but it should drive forward the demand of humanity for more justice. And I wish to underline that beyond its own court cases, my own office can play a role in galvanizing and supporting domestic efforts to document and preserve cultural heritage at risk of destruction in furtherance of its policy of active, dynamic complementarity and cooperation. We have been strengthening our forensic, analytical, and technological tools and expertise in the collection, the analysis, the preservation, and the presentation of different types of evidence. And we stand ready to assist and share information with partners whenever possible and relevant. Excellencies, with these few words, I wish to wish you the very best of luck. I wish you productive discussions on this important topic. I remain myself, and my office remains at your disposal to partner, united for justice, as the theme of this conference is. Partner with all of you, and our common commitment must be to deliver accountability for crimes in Ukraine, as it is our obligation to continue and do better for accountability in all other situations addressed by my own office, with solidarity, with trust, to keep tending the strong partnerships that have been built in Ukraine. We can do better for justice in Ukraine and around the world. Thank you so much for your attention.
Now invite onto the stage Adam Piotr Bodnar, Minister of Justice of the Republic of Poland. Шановні учасники конференції,
Dear conference attendants, let's thank Denis Shmyhal for the participation in the conference.
Dear Mr. Prosecutor General, dear ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great privilege and honor to be here today with you. and to deliver a few words concerning the topic of this conference, but even more general, to say a few words regarding the accountability of war crimes committed in Ukraine. First of all, I would like to thank Andrzej Kostin, Prosecutor General, for invitation for this continuous exchange we are having last week in Berlin, a couple of weeks ago in Warsaw. I hope that we can build together even better cooperation between the government of Poland and Ukraine, as well as between our institutions regarding the cooperation on the accountability for war crimes, but also in terms of joint investigations, in terms of documenting the evidence of committing war crimes. But I would like to say that I'm here not just as a Minister of Justice and the Prosecutor General, but I'm also here as a representative of the government of Poland that is fully committed to support Ukraine by all means in terms of fighting against the Russian aggression. We are doing this from the very first day of the war. In terms of our foreign policy effort, in terms of supporting for refugees from Ukraine, but also in terms of supporting all different efforts leading towards accountability for war crimes. And for example, last weekend we are very proud of our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Radosław Sikorski, who presented really like a strong voice at the United Nations meeting concerning the need to show solidarity and support, not only by countries of Central and Eastern Europe, but by all countries of the European Union, of the whole world towards Ukraine. And I would like to underline that basically it is the priority and it is the line of the Polish government to work like this. In my context, in the context of my work, it means not only supporting the accountability for war crimes before the ICC, but also fighting for the establishment of the special court for the crime of aggression. We know that it is this missing puzzle in the existing infrastructure concerning accountability for war crimes. And I will do whatever it is needed in order to support this international effort by Mr. Kostin, by Ukrainian civil society organizations, by the Ukrainian government, in order to push for the establishment of the court for the crime of aggression. I'm really grateful to Mr. Kostin for mentioning Rafał Lemkin as a person who coined the notion of genocide. But I would like to remind here that there is a very great book by Professor Philip Sands, East-West Street, which portrays the history of Lviv, but also portrays this multiculturalism and this great legal heritage that we have in common and that should be basically promoted in order to fight for the accountability. And I think that nobody of us, when reading this book some time ago, did not even predict that basically this book would be so actual, that this books would be so relevant to the daily cause. And I think that the story of Lemkin and his approach towards accountability for war crimes and especially towards genocide should be kind of a path for us to follow, should be a little bit like an intellectual lighthouse in the context of our work. I would like to say that the Polish prosecution service is fully committed to investigate war crimes. We are part of a joint investigation team. We would like to strengthen our cooperation with the Office of the Prosecutor General, but also with the ICC. A couple of weeks ago I have seen Mr. Karim Khan to talk about this. I hope that maybe next week I will be also able to talk about this. And here in this context, I would like also to mention one more person who is really very close to my heart, Professor Piotr Hofmański, who is the current president of the International Criminal Court. He's the one who was behind this famous arrest warrant against Putin and Belova. And he's finishing his term, Professor Hofmański is finishing his term in the ICC on the 8th of March. But I hope that he will be still one of the leading voices concerning those issues, and he would become a great support to our Polish efforts regarding this. When it comes to the cultural heritage, I think I would like to, there were a lot of things said already, and I would not like to repeat this important connection between the destruction of the cultural heritage and the accountability for war crimes and the international effort to regulate those issues. But I think one of the most important things is that the question of cultural damage, cultural heritage has been mentioned and has been subject of the discussion regarding the operation of the Register of Damages for Ukraine, which is this institution created under the auspices of the Council of Europe. During the meeting in The Hague on the 11th and 15th December last year, upon the proposal by the Deputy Minister of Justice, Irina Mudra, the category of the cultural heritage has been included as one of those claims that should be registered in this register of damages. And I think it is a very important move to go into this direction and basically to make the register of damages as operational as possible in order to register all those cultural heritage damage. Because we know exactly, and it has been mentioned by a number of speakers, how important it is from the point of view of rebuilding the national identity, but also for compensating the loss, for recovery of stolen or looted assets. So I think that if we put a special emphasis on the operation of the Register of Damages, it gives us a chance for the future in terms of taking advantage of this great institution. And so for me it is clear that that cultural heritage should be covered by the Register of Damages operations. I'm happy that one of the members of the board is a great expert on those issues, Polish professor Aleksandra Mężykowska, and you may count on us in terms of supporting her in her work, but also in further development of other measures concerning claims presented by Ukrainian authorities. So I would like to reiterate that for us it is one of the priority topics. I would like to underline that Poland fully supports any efforts concerning accountability for war crimes, and Poland would be always friend of Ukraine in terms of fighting for the war accountability. It is not only in your interest, it is also in our great interest. So once again, thank you very much for inviting me here.
I invite to the stage Alex Florin Florenta, Prosecutor General of Romania.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, today we gathered here under the banner of United for Justice, United for Heritage. These words resonate deeply as we confront the dire situation unfolding in Ukraine, where cultural heritage is under relentless assault. Since the Russian occupation of Crimea and parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and particularly since the full invasion of 2022, we have witnessed a systematic campaign aimed at destroying or pillaging Ukraine's rich cultural heritage. What we are witnessing is not just the destruction of buildings or artifacts. It is an attack on the very identity and soul of Ukraine. The deliberate targeting of churches, monuments, museums, libraries, and historic sites is a critical attempt to erase the diverse tapestry of Ukraine and undermine its sovereignty. We cannot turn a blind eye to the extent of this destruction. The Mariupol Drama Theater or the National Museum of Grigory Skovoroda in Kharkiv are not just buildings, but repositories of Ukraine's collective memory. They are not isolated incidents, but part of a deliberate policy to erase Ukraine's identity and rewrite its history. First and foremost, there is an urgent need to investigate these crimes. The widespread and systematic attacks on Ukraine's cultural heritage demand a comprehensive and rigorous investigation to uncover the full extent of the damage and hold those responsible to account. Every destroyed church, every looted museum, every vandalized monument is a crime against the people of Ukraine and the heritage of all humanity. Addressing the legal issues raised by these attacks presents significant challenges, but is essential for upholding international law and preserving the shared cultural heritage. The deliberate targeting of cultural property is a violation of numerous international conventions of protocols. However, enforcement mechanisms are often inadequate, and perpetrators might frequently act with impunity. Moving forward, we must explore investigative and prosecutorial approaches that will lead to accountability. This requires cooperation and coordination among national authorities, international organizations, and civil society groups. Specialized investigative teams must be deployed to document and collect evidence of cultural destruction and looting, ensuring the perpetrators can be brought to justice before domestic and international courts. Furthermore, we must address the illicit trafficking of cultural objects from temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories. The plunder and looting of movable cultural property not only deprive Ukraine of its heritage, but also fuel transnational organized crime. To combat this scourge, enhanced international cooperation is essential. Countries must strengthen their legal framework to prevent the import and sale of illicit cultural artifacts and enhance cross-border cooperation to disrupt illicit trafficking networks. In conclusion, the defense of Ukraine's cultural heritage is not just a matter of preserving buildings and artifacts. It is a defense of justice, of dignity, and human rights. The rallying cry of United for Justice, United for Heritage reminds us that Ukraine must not be alone in this struggle. It is a call to action for all nations and all peoples who cherish the values of justice and preservation. We must stand united in our determination to investigate these crimes, address the legal challenges they present, hold perpetrators accountable, and combat the illicit trafficking of cultural objects. Only through collective action, we can ensure that justice prevails and heritage endures for generations to come. Mr. Prosecutor General Costin, dear Andrei, Romania will stand shoulder to shoulder to Ukraine in this noble cause, and I assure you of our permanent support as long as it takes. Slava Ukraini!
I invite to the stage Nida Grunsikine, Prosecutor General of Lithuania.
Шановних колеги, pradėsiu nuo neįprasto.
Шановні колеги,
Pradėsiu nuo neįprasto sakinio kalbai teiginio.
розпочну з незвичного твердження для вітального слова.
Esu įsitikinusi, kad mes visi norėtume, kad šiandien šio renginio nebūtų.
Я впевнена, що ми усі
I'm sure that we all would want that such an event never takes place, because it would need peace in Ukraine and more security for Ukraine. However, we don't have this today, which means that we still need to continue work which we started 2 years ago. Otherwise, we would face the consequences none of us even want to ever imagine.
Metu tiek ir taikos metu yra nukreipta į kultūros vertybės, jas niokojant ar sunaikinant siekiant dviejų tikslų – sumenkinti tautos ar valstybės orumą ir įžeisti tautinius jausmus.
сьогодні
Today we need to talk not only about war crimes, but also about aggression, which is aimed at cultural heritage, both in wartime and in peacetime. These attacks aim two goals. affect people and destroy national dignity.
Yra mūsų ginklas, mūsų gynyba.
Working together, listening to each other, hearing each other. This is what is our truth in this war.
Kaip pritariant ir padedant Eurojustui, padarėme pirmosius žingsnius ir šią grupę įkūrėme.
We were guided by this when we started 2 years ago about the necessity of establishing a joint task force. When we made the very first steps facilitated by the Eurojust.
Kuris leistų patogiai, saugiu atstumu, nepervargstant stebėti tai, kas vyksta Ukrainoje.
Unfortunately, none of us has a choice even today. We cannot just stand step aside and watch what happens in Ukraine. Such a position would make us pay a much higher price in the future.
Сьогодні ще раз хочу повторити, що прокуратура Литви буде разом з Україною до самої перемоги.
Слава Україні!
Remarks will be delivered by Ladislav Hamran, President of Eurojust.
The Prosecutor General Kostin, Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to you. Earlier this week, President Zelensky announced that in the past 2 years, more than 31,000 soldiers have lost their lives while defending their country against the Russian invasion. These soldiers, together with many civilians, have paid the highest possible price for our collective freedom. When we think about the consequences of the war, for many of us, the first thing we think about is actually loss of lives. However, then there is the obvious destruction of buildings and infrastructure, as well as tangible economic damage. But in the background, sometimes visible and sometimes less so, another disaster is taking place. When the invasion started, President Putin made no secret of his intention to erase the identity and culture of the Ukrainian nation. Through the targeted destruction of cultural heritage sites, Russia is trying to destroy not only the Ukrainian traditions and culture, but also the Ukrainian right to exist. Our joint presence here today confirms that the international legal community cannot and will not look the other way. Both national and international legal frameworks offers us ways to ensure that crimes against cultural heritage do not go unpunished. First, as we heard already many times during this morning, intentional harm against cultural heritage in the context of an armed conflict can be prosecuted as a war crime. It's well established that war crimes not only address violence to the persons, but also to property. However, we can go even further. Crimes against or affecting cultural heritage may also qualify as crimes against humanity. They are often committed in the context of the widespread and systemic attacks against civilian population. Next, the destruction of cultural heritage is relevant in the context of genocide investigations. While acts of genocide are limited to those seeking the physical or biological destruction of a group, the targeting of a group cultural heritage may constitute evidence of the perpetrator's intention to destroy that group. And finally, there is a link with the crime of aggression as well. Not only because destroying cultural heritage can be an act of aggression, but also because initiating an armed conflict is bound by the cause harm to cultural property. Having the legal possibility to investigate and prosecute does not mean that this process goes without challenges. We at Eurojust, as the EU agency for criminal justice cooperation, are there to support the national and international accountability efforts. We do this in many different ways. For example, through our tailor-made joint investigation team, through our newly established core international crime evidence database, or through the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression. Ladies and gentlemen, crimes against the Ukrainian cultural heritage are not just an attack on the Ukrainian identity, but an attack on humanity as a whole. We have a collective responsibility to protect the Ukrainian culture and ensure that justice is done. Today's conference will help us to ensure a much-needed unified response, and I look forward to our discussions. Slava Ukraini!